I became CEO in a year that saw, the Great Recession happen, the global crash, coupled with a major global problem in cotton supply because there were devastating floods in Pakistan. I became a director as a result of some of the work that I did in the immediate aftermath of September 11th.
Do you feel at home in chaos?
In all honesty, it probably brings the absolute best out of me, because of those sort of significant life experiences that I've had. When 2020 hit, I just instinctively knew how to react. We pivoted very, very quickly. We were buying up all the PPE stocks that we could possibly get our hands on. If you built your cost model based on what was normal, and then that level of cost increase that nobody could have foreseen, those kind of things definitely will put some of our competitors out of business in the next 12 months. For me, it's very, very much not just about trying to keep firefighters safe and well while they're in the job. It's about, helping prevent long-term latency disease and do our bit, from a societal perspective to help firefighters have a long and healthy retirement.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast. Now, today on the podcast, I am welcoming Simon Hunter of Hunter Apparel Solutions Limited. Simon has been the director of Hunter since 2011. Now, Hunter is the pioneer in creation and management of technology-driven professional clothing. In 2020 alone, they produced PPE for over 20,000 members in 23 services in the UK Fire and Rescue Services, 1,000 members of Dublin Fire Brigade, as well as thousands more in the areas of paramedical and medical, defence forces, police, and many more. Simon is accountancy with honours graduate at the University of Ulster, a chartered director of the Fellow of Institute of Directors, and overall winner of the UK Director of the Year Award from the IOD, and he has over 25 years of experience in the uniform and PPE sector. He also received an MBE for services to business and the economy. There's so many things I'm looking forward to us speaking about today, but before we jump in there with Simon, let's hear from our partners of the podcast. First up, we have the wonderful William Wood watches. Now, I'm a massive fan of this brand. I've had my Valiant watch now for probably 2 years. If you're somebody that's into their firefighting history, if you're somebody that likes something classy, something sharp, but also something functional, then you've got to head over to WilliamWoodWatches.com. The authenticity that's behind this brand is absolutely incredible. It's all based around the owner, Johnny, and his grandfather, who was in the fire service for 25 years. He won commendations for his bravery and passed away, after which Johnny started the brand, and this is now the legacy of his grandfather. One of the really memorable acts of William Wood was actually on the 29th of June 1966, when he and 3 fellow firefighters saved 5 small children, aged between 5 and 1, from a severe house fire. And you feel that a lot when you look at the watches. For example, the straps. I mean, that's always the one that really gets the mention when people see it and they go, hey, that's such a unique piece. The red fire hose that I have on my straps are made from hose used by the London Fire Brigade. That iconic red strap comes from hose that's been in the service for a minimum of 10 years. I'm talking stuff that's getting thrown down the street at road traffic collisions. It's getting hauled up the side of buildings. It's actually been in there in the thick of it. And you can see this on the markings as well. Mine's got some black markings around the edging of it, where it's obviously been impregnated with a chemical of some form at some point on an incident. It's actually been out there on the front line. But I mean, they've also got it in the yellow, the green, the blue. So no matter what watch you belong to at your service somewhere across the world, you can make it personal to you. So head over and check them out. I think they're running a 10% discount at the moment. So get straight over there. WilliamWoodWatches.com, an incredible partner of the podcast. Simon Hunter, welcome to the Firefighters Podcast.
Nice to meet you, Pete.
Now, we first met each other at the Emergency Services show. I met yourself, I met some of the colleagues, but I have actually been aware of the brand for quite some time, but I'd never really gotten into the depths of how it all got started. So for people that are unfamiliar, we've done a bit of an intro, but give a people an understanding of who you are and sort of how the company got started.
Sure. So I'm Simon Hunter. I'm the CEO of Hunter Apparel Solutions Limited. We're a UK company, started originally by my grandfather in 1936 in Belfast. And the company started out as a gentleman's outfitter, a gentleman's tailoring operation, really. And even as far back as the 30s, the company was already orientated towards blue light services. So, making formal dress for police, military, fire, etc. Company kind of pivoted around 52, post Second World War, became a manufacturing company, specialized initially in manufacture of shirts, and really kind of throughout the next number of decades became very, very proficient and a bit of a world leader in certain niches in terms of shirt making. Very well known in the airline sector throughout the sort of.
So we start recording today. We spoke about you first started in the company when you were very, very young. I've got young children. I think there's so much value in having them interact with things like businesses and tangibly adding value to people and the whole work ethic and character building that comes into this. When did you first sort of start getting involved in the company, and what do you think the benefits were of being involved in it so young?
Well, yeah, Peter, I agree. I mean, I think getting young people exposure to business and what it does through tours and so forth as early as possible is really vitally important. And we do that as a company. We have, in the course of any year, we'll have multiple school tours of quite young children sometimes through to sort of university aged kids in through the building, explaining who we are, what we do, and trying to make the sector attractive, because it's a very, very diverse sector. Myself started very, very young. It wouldn't be the done thing these days, of course, but I came in and worked summer jobs and Christmas holiday jobs and during Easter holidays and so forth when I was 7, 8 years old. Clearly, that's not something that is the norm today, but way back in the 1970s, that was sort of.
Do you think it's sad that we don't kind of do more of that now? Because my dad ran a building firm. I was the same. Whenever I would be off on school holidays, there was nobody at home. So I would go to work with my dad from like the ages of 6 and 7, very similar to yourself, filling skips and making tea for people and stuff like that. And
absolutely.
And I appreciate that can be taken in a very poor way, and for those people of ill morals and all that sort of stuff, it can be abused. That's a vulnerable position for certain people. But I believe that was a very, unless this is naive, you may know far better than I do, I'm sure you do, but that was a very small number, very small percentage of people that would have had those really terrible experiences. And we've kind of thrown the baby out with the bathwater. Now, I've got children. My youngest is 9. She comes up and helps with the horses every morning, mucking out poo and stuff like that. I think that's a great character building stuff. But my middle child is 15, and, trying to get him a job now, and 16, he has that appetite. You want the whole paper round stuff and all this sort of stuff. And I think it's tragic. I feel like we're setting people's work ethic back so far by not giving or not being able to give them that level of exposure that you and I had. Or certainly, I'm not going to put myself in the same bracket as yourself, but how much do you think that really forged your work ethic?
I could have a huge influence. I mean, I think like any family-owned company, and we are still that today, whether it's just listening to your mum and dad talking over dinner, just generally picking up on the demands of running a kind of an entrepreneurial business. You get a real insight from a very young age, as to the challenges, as to the benefits, the passion, I guess, and. Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying, Pete. It was formative for me, and I think it gave me a very, very deep understanding, such that, by the time I was in my early 20s, I had huge exposure to work, whereas, you get a kid out of university now at 21 and, you sort of think you've got a kind of a semi-finished person to work with, and then you find out that they don't understand some relatively straightforward work practices and disciplines, and
I think that's so hard in the emergency services as a whole as well, because there's a couple of things there, and I'll say it because I don't necessarily think you would, but nobody's ever writing their own checks sometimes in the emergency services, which is one issue. But also, a guest said to me a long time ago that we're getting people now that go from mama's house straight into the firehouse, and that's like an emergency services analogy, but so often it's true, because we're not getting those character building aspects of, how much value do you need to add to something to be able to, would you sign your own paycheck? And I always say to my daughter, I don't know if you ever had pocket money when you were a kid, but I did a little bit, but it wasn't the pocket money. I always used to say, the question was not, can I have £2? It's what can I do to earn £2? What value can I add to the world to add to get £5? Not just gimme, and can I? You're always putting yourself in a vulnerable position versus, what value can I add to the world that's going to get this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I am very much the same as a father of two sons. One of my boys Jude is 21 and my other son Noah is 15, and they've always had duties their whole life, looking after animals at home and walking them and caring for them and feeding them and so forth, and as soon as they were able, taking lead responsibilities for things like that, and so it has done them no harm. I think it's helped make them really well-rounded people, and now they simply know they've got a role to play at home, so they're just used to contributing, and I think that's part of what you're getting at.
Absolutely.
That
it's going to stand them head and shoulders over against their colleagues as well, because they have a difference, the whole nature-nurture aspect. That it's light and day versus somebody that's never had that sort of development from a childhood.
Yeah, I agree.
I wanted to jump back and ask you about the market that the guys that your grandfather chose to go into. Why exactly did they choose to sort of do the formal side of frontline workers? What was it about the emergency services? You said about police. I know you do a lot of work with the paramedics as well as the fire service and the military as a whole. Why did they choose to get into that sector?
Truthfully, Pete, I don't know. The company was started on the 25th of June, 1936. My grandfather was alive up until he was in his late 90s, actually, and so I did get to know him very well, but that's not a question I ever asked. I've never heard my father say, specifically why it was that. But yeah, that's how they started out in business, and I think they were, young men. He and his brother at that time. The company was originally called their brothers, but I have no idea why they picked that niche. It's obviously it's almost forever, and so look, in Northern Ireland, the way back in the 1930s, there probably wasn't a whole lot of other choices about. There was a fantastic in Belfast with huge scale industrial manufacturing in the shipbuilding sector, and the Titanic area and so forth. Other than that, there was a long history of Northern Ireland being one of the UK's kind of textile-rich areas, if you know what I mean. Textiles from, I guess, sort of Irish linen industry in the first instance, and then developing into things like, the city that I'm in just now, commonly known as Derry, Londonderry today, was the first city in the world to make a shirt in a factory environment. For example, I remember reading that Karl Marx, when he was writing Das Kapital, he sent his daughter actually to the city here to study division of labor, because he thought that it was the best example that existed in the world at that time of division of labor, the way a shirt was put together in a factory environment. So a bit of nerdy history there for you. What I can tell you is way back then, you had 5 collars and 5 cuffs, 5 sets of cuffs. Okay. And you had one shirt body, and basically a gentleman would have put, a fresh set of cuffs and collars on each day, but believe it or not, would have worn the body of the shirt for the whole week. For example, one of the company names that happened in the trajectory of this business was that it was called Huntwright Shirt and Collar Company. So, for any of the older listeners, Troubenized collars were a thing, sort of a kind of almost like a rigid collar structure that was attached to a shirt, and it was quite common to have companies that were called shirt and collar companies.
I love that, and it makes sense as well, because like you say, when people wear it underneath a suit jacket, or when you think of the police or the fire or anything like that, they would usually always have their dress uniform on top. So the cuffs and the collars are the bits that they want to keep nice, but like I say, the shirt beneath would be interchangeable, I suppose.
Yeah, it's just funnily enough, my wife and I have just come from a weekend in London, and she was shopping with her girlfriends, and one of the photographs she sent me was from a nice store in London, and it was a Gucci collar and cuff arrangement, exactly like it was back in the day when I
just almost full circle, isn't it? You have seen that. You've seen that a lot in like the last 12 months. We've seen a lot of people have gone into that niche clothing market where these things that were out of fashion for so long really have come full circle. It's always the case with fashion, I suppose.
Yeah, very much so. Fashion's very cyclical, and you've definitely seen over the last 10 years, some sort of, fairly neglected British brands, let's say, become quite fashionable again globally,
I wanted to ask you, because your grandfather, obviously I'm not saying they didn't go through easy times as such in the creation of the company, but in comparison to taking us to modern day, the sort of past 24 months, there's been tremendous challenges, but you yourself have been in the business for over 25 years. I wanted to ask you about the last 24 months. COVID-19 has been really challenging and far-reaching, and it's going to have effects for so long. Now, you've been the CEO through tragedies, many, including 9/11, 2001, financial crashes in 2008. You have managed and led through so many different crises. So I wanted to ask you that aspect. As somebody that's been recognized through your entrepreneurial and through your leadership abilities in business and the economy in itself. What do you see when you see people manage through crises? What do you see when it's been done well? And what can people learn from going through a crisis and trying to lead and navigate a company through that?
Yeah, I mean, those are the kind of skills that you can't learn at college. And I became CEO in a year that saw, the Great Recession happen, the global crash. It was coupled with a major global problem in cotton supply, because there were devastating floods in Pakistan in the same year that just had a hugely detrimental effect on the cotton crop, which is used in the clothing that we make, that caused prices to rocket in some of the offshore territories that we manufacture in. There just so happened to be quite a lot of political instability, and that resulted in massive pay increases in those countries. So it's sort of a triple whammy effect. My thumb was no sooner in the CEO seat than there was several major global crises to deal with. So, in some respects, I think I'm quite useful in a tight corner, because from the day and hour that I took on this job, I was managing an extreme adversity. I became a director as a result of some of the work that I did in the immediate aftermath of September 11th. It was a very tough time. At that time, we were very strongly pivoted towards airline businesses globally. We were making garments for British Airways, Virgin Atlantic, Qatar Air, most of the big Arab brands, most of the big British brands. And, we weren't sophisticated as a business at that time in terms of, analyzing data and looking at market positions and so forth. And so we had a devastating impact at that time as a result of September 11th, when transatlantic travel, on which we had become so dependent in terms of our manufacturing base here in the UK, which was, quite a size at that time, depended. So, that was another kind of formative part of my career. So
I think that's a similar challenge to what a lot of people have had through this pandemic, because people that won't have had that's a strange thing to say as a benefit, won't have had the benefit of going through the 9/11 tragedies, because there were so many correlating factors with how all transport has just ceased in this recent one as well. Yeah. People have seen 40% of their trade that was reliant on that part of the sector just vanish overnight. Mm-hmm. But you guys kind of maybe had a similar blueprint that you'd followed in the past. So I imagine it empowered you much more. Do you feel at home in chaos?
In all honesty, it probably brings the absolute best out of me, because of those sort of significant life experiences that I've had during my career. Also I've been traveling extensively in Asia all my working life, and seen the culture of wearing, face coverings and masks and so forth as kind of normal jogging in many countries that I would have gone to. And, when you kind of mix all those things up in a casserole, let's say, when 2020 hit, I knew how to react. I just instinctively knew how to react, how to assess the situation.
You're
very
like a
quickly.
Battle-hardened general. You'd had those battle scars already, so it's not no one's invincible, but you'd had similar hits before. Yeah. They didn't floor you in the same way, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's true. We pivoted very, very quickly. Actually, before COVID even had landed in the UK, we were buying up all the PPE stocks that we could possibly get our hands on. And, it was really when COVID was hitting Italy.
How did you know that? Where did I know you deal internationally. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to double click on that. When did those first indicators come from you? Because I look back at books like Winners by Alistair Campbell is a great book, and people may like or dislike him, but he spoke about several big tragedies or catastrophes that the government faced, and what really does, because you read the press these days and everything's a tragedy, everything's a crisis, everything's a crisis, but there's only really been a few real pivotal crises that people have seen coming over the horizon and gone, right, we actually need to react to this one. You say you pivoted quite early. How did you know this was going to be something that you needed to switch on for?
I can only say instinct, truthfully. I mean, I'm a absolute voracious devourer of media, British, American, and sort of global media. Whenever COVID was starting to crop up in Italy, I just thought, this is going to come here. Let's prepare. So I pulled the senior team into my office and I said, this is what I think is going to happen. This is why I think it's going to happen. This is what we need to do. Honestly, I think they thought I had lost my mind.
Really? Okay.
Because they were sort of saying, how much exactly PPE do you want us to buy? And what types of PPE do you want us to buy? And I was sort of saying, buy a year's worth. And they were going, really? You want us to buy a year's worth of all of these items and put them into our UK warehouse? Are you sure?
That's a lot of equity, that you're going to sit, because I remember reading in one of your things, so few companies are cash rich. I'm not saying your company's flush or anything like that, but so many people have money sat on computers that doesn't really exist in reality. They're very asset rich, but they don't necessarily have the ability to pivot because they've built their model a little bit lopsided in that respect.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I often find myself saying, unfortunately, is that our sector, in reality, the sort of uniform and PPE sector that I've specialised in my career, it's best characterised by financial instability and bankruptcy. I mean, almost everybody that existed as a company at the start of my career no longer exists.
Wow.
Either because they've been, MBO'd, taken over in a fire sale, gone bust, whatever, they just don't exist in there. I can think of one company that we still compete against today that was in existence at the start of my career. All the rest of them have gone, and that's got to be 20-something.
Is that because a race to the bottom? Because people try and make things so cheap, it's not sustainable. Why are they? Why do they? Because this is the emergency. I know you serve a lot of other sectors, but we're talking predominantly here about PPE. Yeah. Emergency services isn't going anywhere. It adapts and changes and innovates, and its purpose will slightly change, but it's not going anywhere. Crises and the need to serve the communities is always going to be there.
You know what? It's a brutally tough sector, though. I mean, government contracting is not for the faint-hearted. If you carefully read the clauses that are in a typical government contract, they're brittle in reality. I mean, some of the big PPE contracts that exist in the UK right now are effectively things like 7-year price fixing. And I mean, in reality, there is no company in the world in any sector can realistically predict what the
No, that's what I mean. They're asking you to make a guarantee and absorb any loss that's going to happen in that 7-year period, which is just unrealistic. Do you think there's an aspect, and I'll say this because I said it earlier, about writing blank checks. Do you think they just have a visceral dislike for private sector, and a lot of these people they're not playing with their own money, and sometimes I feel with the podcast when we speak to people, it's very difficult for them to get a realistic comprehension of how the cogs turn in economy because they don't exist, and that's not meant in a condescending manner, but they have a very different perspective on what's happening in the real world.
Well, I mean, maybe, but in some respects, our sector has done its own self-harm. Got itself a bad reputation because of financial instability and bankruptcy and poorly managed supply chains as a consequence of that. So, I can't blame, the people in the public sector who maybe don't trust the private sector, who don't have terribly positive feelings towards it because, some of them, if they've been in the saddle for a while in a job, will have seen all of that and probably been on the negative.
They're not held to the same, not held to the same moral code as well. Sometimes, we're held by law and a lot of things that we can't get out of. Not that we want to. Public sector versus the private sector. Sometimes people can be a little bit selective, like you said, to their own detriment about the rules that they follow. Maybe.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely arguable, Pete. I think what's sad though is that, at the end of the day, we all pay a corporate tax rate or a personal tax rate that is driven by the amount of money the government believes it needs to take from organizations and people to make everything work. And all of the little decisions that are made in the public sector contribute towards that as well. So, for example, if I go back to my previous point, if a contract is set up for a 7-year fixed price, or effectively a 7-year fixed price, such that perhaps you can have a maximum cap of 1 or 2% of an uplift or something like that. In reality, that pushes a crazy amount of risk onto the contractor to work out what risk capital should go into the mathematical equation that allows you to drive a product price. And it's always going to mean that at the start of the contract, effectively, the taxpayer is worse off because the charge is high because there is so much risk capital involved.
Yeah.
The reality being, as you go through that 7-year period of risk, you could be in catastrophic loss making just because of the way the British pound is pivoted against the dollar, for example. The kind of movements, for example, in the week that we're in, the pound is edging dangerously close to 1.30 against the American dollar. It has not been anything like that. That means that everything that is coming into our country as an import is now dearer. There is an inflation that will come directly from that, but it won't be felt for perhaps 6 months. So even our currency carries with it a huge consequential risk in terms of what am I going to charge for product X. Never mind what might happen to raw material prices, what might happen to labour prices in the interim. In the UK right now, we've got, from an employer's perspective, we've got national insurance has gone up, pensions have gone up, minimum wage has gone up. That has a differential knock-on effect in wages in general. Corporation tax has gone up. So the burden on employers has gone up hugely. So our own domestic cost regime is pushing costs up. And for companies that import, most people who supply the uniform and PPE into the UK market are importing almost all of it. Container costs, for example, have gone up by an incredible multiple. A container from, let's say, China pre-COVID, $2,000 now can easily be $15,000, $16,000, $18,000.
Jesus, that is obscene.
Yeah,
wow, that's not. Obviously, it's a percentage increase, but that is astronomical. That's 10x.
It's astronomical, and if you built your cost model based on what was normal, and then that kind of level of cost increase that nobody could have foreseen, it's absolutely not possible to forecast that. Where does that leave your profit margin? Those kind of things definitely will put some of our competitors out of business in the next 12 months. Definitely, because, the sector's not very stable anyway, and only the strongest companies will survive all of that kind of variable cost chaos. It's a big issue. People that are, in the kind of position that I'm in a company will see that, but the effect of it won't be felt on the public purse for some time, and not tax be felt for some time, but it's definitely coming. Those bills have to be paid somewhere. Mm. If I was on the other side of the table in the public sector making a contract, I would not be asking for long-term fixed pricing. I would be asking for 12-month fixed pricing post-contract with some sort of fair mechanism such that the contractor got a fair chance to reprice on a fair basis. That would be the way I think it should be done. And it's absolutely the case that if it were done in that way, that the British taxpayer would be better off because of the fact that price would not be carrying massive amounts of risk capital because of long-term fixed selling prices.
You mentioned there about you were a voracious consumer of media, and I imagine in your role that aspects of that are essential. I absorb and listen to a lot of books, and I do a lot of reading and stuff like that. But in terms of mainstream media, I find it very difficult to engage with on a regular basis. I don't know if perhaps I probably have got a weaker mindset than yourself. How do you constantly consume media and still stay sane and not run around worrying that the world is going to explode, the sun's going to burn out, the waters are going to rise, and everything is going to go to hell in the next 24 hours. How do you keep your head while consuming mainstream media on a daily basis?
Well, first thing I do is in my news feed, I pay very careful attention to the title, because if it sounds highly speculative, I never read it. If it's all ifs and buts and maybes, I just don't read that article. I want to read about things that have actually happened to try and understand what the possible impact of it is. So I narrow my field of view very, very strongly in that way, because if you engage in reading all the articles that are out there based on, ifs and buts and maybes and possiblies, you'll just get nothing done. So I think that helps. I mean, I have a kind of a daily kind of regime and a daily discipline that I go through each day and sort of enjoy, and have a sort of a system, if you know what I mean. And part of it's to be informed by things like that and take them into account in my daily plan, let's say, or my weekly plan or my monthly plan. But yeah, I mean, that's my sort of high level approach to that.
It's got to be so difficult to do that and know who is who's qualified to be informing you, because like you say, there's so many people that are just creating noise. They're trying to trigger that dopamine reaction. They're trying to create controversy. Yeah. Especially, I feel like business leaders, in a weird way, are just as vulnerable as other people, because they've got so much stake in the game that if you scream fire in the corner, they're going to be the first one with their head up like a meerkat going, do I need to be aware of this? Do I need to be aware of this? Is it noise or is it actual credible information? That's got to be so hard to come by now.
Well, I guess, like anybody, you kind of get trusted sources and things that you feel have been reliable in the past, and that's not always a sort of an indicator of reliable in the future, but some sources are more reliable than others, and we all have a decent sense of the very sensational newspapers, let's say, in the UK, and
yeah.
Too much with that, and unless for a bit of light entertainment, maybe.
I wanted to ask you about innovation. Now, you guys won the Viscount Award in Innovation of the Year. Innovation is something that is a bit of a punchline for some people. It gets bandied around quite a lot. And I think there's a real sort of misconception around people's interpretation of what is innovation versus what is just a flash in the pan idea and what is just somebody repackaging something old. What do you think, as a company that's known for this characteristic, what is true innovation, and what do you think people should be thinking about when trying to innovate?
Well, innovation is one of those business buzzwords that every company to some extent wants to attach itself to, but in Hunter, one of our core values is innovation. I think what people notice, what clients notice or prospective clients notice, is when they come here, when they come to visit us and do a tour of this site that I'm talking to you from, they can see that it's real because there's investment, and the investment is clearly innovation-oriented investment. And so I think that's one of the things I've always noticed. When people actually come here and visit and see who we are in the flesh, they leave with a very strong sense of the fact that we're genuinely a very innovative company. And I mean that not just from a product perspective, but also from a service perspective, because at a high level, our company is sort of described as a professional clothing company, not a fashion clothing, not a retail clothing company, but a company that only makes for professional organizations. The other side of Hunter is that we are also truly a software company, a technology company. So we have almost 20 years of experience of developing software products that help us service our customers in a very value-orientated way. So, they get to see both sides of that here. During 2020, we invested very, very strongly in the business and, put sort of advanced robotics into our R&D center here, and some robotics into our warehouse operation that we have here and so forth. So these are very tangible things that people can see when they come and interact with us, and it's lovely to tour the business with people and show them, here's what this is, here's what we use it for, here's what it does. And, these are bits of kit that they wouldn't commonly come into contact with. So, it tends to be, I genuinely believe, interesting for people to come and sort of interact with us and see see how innovation works at Hunter.
Absolutely, and I can say that as an authenticity piece, having spoken to a couple of different members of your team. Obviously, when I met at the Emergency Services Show, and even before we came on the podcast today, I asked you about travel and meeting people in person, and the balance that COVID has given the distance in. And when I spoke to having somebody from Hunter on, they said Simon will be well up for it because he has the story. He loves that side of the interaction. Why do you think it's important that we do continue to have these sorts of conversations and that we continue to value that in-person part of it? Because like you say, people can appear very differently on a website or on a social media platform, but you say that people take the best authenticity when they have that in-person interaction, when they come and actually see and feel and observe the pulse of the company. I think that's quite a rare thing now, with people saying that, it's much more efficient to do it at a distance. Why do you think it's important for people still to come and experience that authenticity of companies?
I mean, there's definitely a place for both, and there's no doubt about it. I mean, if I look back pre-COVID, I did used to occasionally feel, is this really a good use of my time or the client's time to go and visit for this particular aspect of whatever's in consideration? Is it really worth the journey and putting together the meeting face to face? And the truth is, I don't think it was. So there really is a place to replace some of that with Teams and so forth, and that is for the good of the client and the contractor. But there are some things you can't do properly unless you're face to face. And I think it's vitally important that when people in the emergency services are contracting with the private sector, that they do, at least with the shortlisted companies in a tender, come and visit. Because if they don't, it's potentially encouraging bad behaviour where, there's a lovely glossy story put together that has no real substance and reality. And if it's never going to be checked, it's almost encouraging that type of behavior. So we're not from that culture. So, we want people to come. We want people to audit us. We want people to come and interact and see who we are and what we do and how we do it, so that they see that we're genuine people and that they would be proud to contract with us. So that kind of thing is certainly not something usefully done through Teams or some media like that.
With a big enough investment, you could get a company that could place 90% of its resources and its finance in the imagery, the branding, the marketing. They could set up some sort of drop shipping, and they never actually exist in reality, and then they lock themselves into a 7-year deal with an emergency services company, and it just goes horrifically wrong after the first month when things don't start coming. The quality of the product is terrific because you've never really had that in-face interaction. That, well, certainly yourself came from an era of a handshake community where there was still a lot of value in looking each other in the eye and exchanging that oxytocin, shaking hands and going, I'm going to let you know you're going to do what you say you're going to do, and so am I. And we'll sign stuff as well, but there's a lot of value in that still. Yeah,
for sure. And, I think, particularly young people that have come from a very different culture where it is very much digital and so forth, need to understand that, the world still really requires that face-to-face interaction, and educational establishments must teach those kind of skills to young kids that maybe aren't getting them taught at home.
Well, that's now going to be the scarce resource, isn't it? With all this technology and efficiency, I have it with my children sometimes. I don't know if you ever have, where the old things of, look someone in the eye, go over there and ask how much it is, shake their hand, sit up and listen when somebody's speaking to you. It sounds very parenting and it sounds very condescending, but where technology is going to overtake and make so many things more efficient, that's actually going to be the scarce resource, somebody that can effectively, the art of communication, the art of conversation, that's why I love the podcast so much, that's being lost.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more strongly, Pete. And kids that are getting taught that at home have a colossal advantage. There's no two ways about it.
I wanted to ask you next about your MBE. I think you're the first guest who ever had, and I apologise to any previous guests if that's not the case, who's actually been awarded an MBE. That must have been strange and surreal, and I say that with respect. I'm sure it was well earned, but what was that whole experience like, and why were you given one?
My MBE was for services to business and the economy, and I think what I've kind of learnt is that although the sort of business and the economy, it kind of is and kind of isn't. I think an awfully significant part of getting an award like that is actually also very strongly about not necessarily what you do in work, what you do other than work. That's something that's become apparent to me. It's a colossal honor. It's actually my visit was 6 or 8 weeks ago, even though the MB was sort of awarded to me about nearly 2 years ago. So everything's been delayed because of COVID. So
wow.
Initially, I was meant Buckingham Palace, and as I say, that was to have happened a long time ago. But it turned out to be Windsor Palace, and it turned out to only be very recently. But it's just a magnificent experience. I had Princess Anne. Got to be honest, I was kind of hoping for Kate Middleton, but
I'd be the same. I don't think we get to choose, but that'd be me. Is she about? Can I just say hi?
Princess Anne was lovely. Obviously, in recent weeks and months, Her Majesty's been not so very well, so she's not doing them at the minute. And I know there's a massive backlog. I think I read somewhere there's about 3,000 or more sort of in the backlog because of COVID. So the royal family have a lot of work over the next year, I would say.
Absolutely.
To crunch through that big backlog.
I wanted to ask you about the tech aspect. I know we've spoken about it there, but it's not just known for clothing. You're absolutely right. You specialize, and I saw on the website, I was looking again this morning, the whole tech for good solutions that we see within the marketplace. You mentioned about some of the things you've inputted into your warehouses and stuff like that, but looking a little bit more holistically at the sector, what are some of the things that you think are going to have the biggest impact as we try to, buzzword bingo again, we try to get more efficient, we try to get more streamlined in our businesses? What things are you most excited about seeing develop, both out of COVID, I suppose, but also in how we utilize technology in your sector?
Well, yeah, that's one of the things that's a major buzz for me. I'm really into the use of technology in the company. Before I worked at this company, I worked with a big American technology company that made read-write. It was a very, very highly progressive, multi-billion-dollar company with colossal technology investments. So I got to see how a huge technology company operates, and I brought some of that into this company. In some respects, we're a very purpose-oriented company, if I can say that. Very much focused on this sector and how we can use that sort of concept of tech for good, for the good of our customers and ultimately for firefighters. So, there's a lot to be done. One of the things that sort of occurred over the last while, Hunter were the first company to introduce artificial intelligence-based sizing to the UK. We were the first company to do it. We did it in 2019. And subsequently, I have done a lot of work in that respect. So what I realized at the start of COVID was that actually sizing people the old-fashioned way, let's say, was no longer really responsible. It was no longer a very safe thing to do because, typically we'll take a size set of, fire kit or, workwear or whatever it is, and we'll ask people to try it on. But let's say I'm, John Smith, and I'm a recruit, and I'm in a recruit class of 50 folks, and I'm a medium regular, and I come on into the sizing room and I try on the medium regular. I could be asymptomatic with COVID, coat those items in COVID, unbeknownst to myself. My size is taken, I'm out of the room, and now Paul Smith's coming behind me and he's a medium regular. He tries on the sizing set that I've just tried on and infected with COVID, and the next thing, Paul Smith's got COVID, etc., etc. So, I realized that bringing AI-based sizing to the sector was actually more important than I even realized, because in 2019, I wanted to do it because of the fact that it was, going to save money and save the convenience thing.
Yeah, a massive cost saving, but also it's never been tremendously hygienic, has it? We've all seen the loaner kits that get sent around by a few companies, and you think, bloody hell, how many people have worn this?
Yeah, and obviously these thoughts that we now have about, how appropriate is it to do that anymore with COVID still with us. Actually, it's not a good thing to get sick from colds and flus and so forth, and all of that can also be picked up by wearing something that someone else has just worn before you. So AI sizing very definitely something that's going to be strongly present in the sector going forward. There's no two ways about that. There's a massive amount to be done, though, Pete, in respect of technology in regard to care and maintenance. I mean, the whole issue of firefighter cancer that
it's massive.
People are now very.
We've had a few people tiptoe around it, and we need to move a lot more consciously towards it. We're going to have the unions on speaking about it, and there's some scientists that have come on post-Grenfell. I've not released the episode yet around contamination, and we need to be a lot more, because it's a really you talk about lag and lead measures and stuff like that. This is something that doesn't show its head for a decade or longer maybe, but once you've made the mistake and once you've had that constant exposure, you can't turn the clock back.
Unfortunately, that's reality. And however, the good news is that there is a lot that can be done. That is very, very strongly, it's an area I'm extremely passionate about. We set out very clearly to be the provider of the best care maintenance system in the UK and Ireland, where we trade as well. So we do what we do differently. It uses technology. It's a little bit more expensive because of what we do, but the net result is we have third-party scientific evidence to show that what we do and how we do it produces a better result. And that is cleaner clothes, less toxins on clothes, and as such, healthier firefighters wearing our stuff. So we are going to continue to push boundaries of what's possible there. There's quite a few things that we have up our sleeve that we will bring to market through 2022, but it's something that I love. It just feels to me like it's just morally incumbent on companies like us to do the right thing and to try and really force those technologies into the market that can help protect those that protect society. For me, it's very, very much not just about trying to keep firefighters safe and well while they're in the job. It's about helping prevent long-term latency disease and trying to do our bit, from a societal perspective, to help firefighters have a long and healthy retirement post-job.
As the market leader for such a long period of time, if you are not going to do it, then who is? Do you know what I mean? You're the one. The morals can cost money sometimes, but the cost of not doing it is going to cost a lot of life. Now, your company's got 4 core values. We've already sort of touched on innovation, but I wanted to ask you about teamwork, more specifically because this is one of the values that as essential characteristics for companies and teams and everything inside and outside of the emergency services sector. Now, what do you think that people who are sort of seeking that common goal, what do you think are some of the essential characteristics of teamwork? We
sort of take an approach which we have a sort of a tool that we use in the company which effectively identifies people in 4 ways, basically based on a color scheme, sort of yellow, green, red, blue. And each of these colours have particular attributes. And what's quite important, I've found over the trajectory of my career, is to try and make sure that the senior team is a mix of those colours and not too dominantly in one direction or another. And to try and make sure that you've got a nice balance of those colours across the kind of next layer of leadership in the company. And I think if you do that right at a fundamental level, you've got the right kind of ingredients to encourage teamwork and to encourage, a real feeling of collegiate and activities and trying to keep the company culture going in the right direction. I think that's really important to have that, like you say, was referred to, a balance. Has that been developed from something, has it been like a Myers-Briggs or a Belbin or, as a tools builder? How have you developed that? Has it been a sort of an amalgamation of all of them? Is it a more characteristic-based thing? Because it's like you say, you don't want to become subject to groupthink and those sorts of subconscious biases. It's important to have a balance, isn't it? Yeah, definitely. It's a sort of an academic tool that I learned once upon a time and have kind of grown as I've grown in age to understand how vitally important it is. When it comes to the leadership aspect of teams, 2 things kind of occur to me. One is that I'm always trying to encourage people to be able to make decisions without having to refer to their line manager, if at all possible. So systemize the business such that, through good training and good systems, people can just crack on without having to constantly ask for permission or whatever. It's not really the culture that I want to have in a company that I work in. I want people genuinely empowered as far as humanly possible. And secondly, from a leadership perspective, people learn in different ways. People process information in different ways. And unless you've got a team that's made up of people with different types of characteristic, the cascade of learning gets blocked and communication doesn't work properly. Everything that's good in business starts with good communication. So I think having those fundamentals right in a culture and in a system help us develop the best possible teams we can.
Requires a lot of self-awareness for stuff like that, though. You kind of lead me into, I wanted to ask you maybe a few personal questions, to be fair, in and around your own personal development. You've probably had a lot of formal, informal, forced, encouraged, after you've got an MBE and after you've been in business for 25 years. How does personal development exist for you now? Does it still exist? And sort of how do you engage with it? What does it look like for you now?
On a daily basis, I use a thing that I would encourage anybody to use called Monk Manual. I buy them from America, bring them in by the caseload, and I give them to people who are important to me and people that I think can benefit from them.
Monk Manual, is that Mike, Oscar, November?
Yeah, it's a guy called Stephen Lawson created the Monk Manual, and it's just a great system. It basically has a very, very structured approach to a month, a week, and a day. And it basically creates a kind of a skeletal structure for the month, the week, and the day to encourage you to think in a particular way and then to execute in a particular way. Anybody that I've given one to always ends up coming back to me telling me that it's transformative and they love it and it's beneficial. So, for example, the daily habit is 3 priorities only. Not everything can be important, right? So what are the 3 things you're going to focus on today?
Everything, Simon. My priorities list is massive. Oh, no, you're right. I've got like 7 different lists and I have to filter them out because some stuff is just so goddamn interesting, but you're like, how does this complement this strategic goal? Or are you just chasing shiny things?
Yeah, exactly. So, as I always say to the team, when everything's important and everything's urgent, nothing's important and nothing's urgent. So, having just 3 things that are my priorities for the day helps me focus. I've then got a kind of a structured to-do list. It then sort of teases out, what are your 3 gratitudes for the day, in the day that you're about to enter? What are you looking forward to in the day? Teases out, what ways can I give in the day that I'm in? It then sort of reflectively at the end of the day asks you to record, what are the highlights of that day? When were you at your best? When did you feel unrest? One way I can improve tomorrow. So that, that's just a sort of a structure of the titles that it challenges you to.
I can join you with the gratitude. I think I can claim a small win there. I've got a little 4-point gratitude. It's like a very small it'll be A5 pad that's next to my bed, and that's the one I engage with. Everything else I do electronically, and I've got to get away from that because when I do it electronically, there's just so many other crap, for want of a better description, to be honest with you, that tends to invade it. There's a lot of value in doing some things in written form, isn't it? They say think in ink actually forces you to take it out of your mind and put it down on paper. Absolutely, and having it in paper just causes, I think, deeper thought about whatever you've written as you communicate through it, and it comes through your hand. It really is this important to me. I'm writing it down. I'm like committing it to the universe. Absolutely. It exists now. Absolutely. So that's Stephen Lawson, Monk Manual. We'll put that link in the notes for this. Are there any other books or films or documentaries that you think people would benefit from looking at? I mean, it might sound a little bit chaotic, but I think I have about 4 books that I'm reading right now, also sort of simultaneously. I'm reading Paul Acker's 2-Second Lean, How to Grow People and Build a Lean Culture. I'm also reading Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold. I'm also reading Who by Jeff Smart and Randy Street. So, yeah, I'm kind of dipping in and out of all 3 of those books right now for different reasons. I'm familiar with Jeff Smart's book. Can I encourage you to, I know you don't need it, I'm sure you've got a laundry list. I just finished The Undercover Economist, which is a really fantastic book. I think that came out in the last year. I absolutely love that one. Is there anything you wish you had known when you first started in business that you know now? Oh, gosh. Do you know something that a great belief in? I don't know if you've come across him, Wim Hof. Yeah, Wim Hof. He does. I've got an ice bath. I'll send you a link. I do cold submersion every morning for about 5 minutes. I do my breathing exercises, and then I'll do my immersion. I hold it at somewhere between 0 and 1. It's not quite freezing, but you just see the ice crystallizing on the surface. It's just a converted chest freezer, in all honesty with you. You can buy some really expensive ones, but the massive shock of cortisol you get from that. But sorry, yes, Wim Hof.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing all of the above as well. To be honest, I can very, very comfortably sit in full-on ice, and it doesn't trouble me. A cold shower first thing in the morning, though, I kind of find more psychologically challenging for some reason than
I
the
find
ice
it more
bath.
psychologically challenging because it's hitting me in the face. I think it triggers the that mammalian drowning instinct when you feel like. I think it's the fact that it hits my face, it shocks me. Whereas if I submerge myself foot down, it's a lot easier, and I feel when my body stops panicking about 4 or 5 seconds in, and then all of that norepinephrine, all of that adrenaline starts to secrete into my body. And you just feel like a beam of light then.
Yeah, I kind of wonder, is it just having a bald head? You know, when the cold water hits the top of, you know, you really, really feel it. And I kind of do a 2-minute freezing cold shower after I've washed myself in hot water in the morning, and it definitely sets you up for the day. I kind of wish I had learned that and the benefits of that at a younger age. My oldest boy, Jude, he's unbeknownst to me, he's been doing that for something like 3 years.
Good lad. There's something about, isn't there, dragging subliminal activities like breathing, like heart rate, trying to drag things out of the subconscious, play with them, and then place them back. This is why I like just doing the breathing exercises. Some people get so lightheaded just because they've not really breathed properly. Maybe for 30 years, maybe all their life, they've not really consciously thought about their breath work. And so many people are mouth breathers as well. They don't really... they're not very efficient. Yeah, I mean, you're obviously extremely learned in this, so I understand the resonance of everything you're saying there, and so I've been through some of that learning and some of those experiences myself. I want to be respectful of your time, so I just wanted to finish with the last couple. What's something you think, a common piece of advice you see business people, entrepreneurs, what's a common piece of advice you think they should ignore? You know, this is a very Northern Irish thing. You know, my father said to me, you know, don't put your head above the parapet because it will get cut off. You know, it was kind of like, you know, don't use marketing very much. You know, don't tell the world the stuff that the company's good at. You know, it was a bizarre kind of piece of advice in all honesty. That, I think, still permeates in this country. There's a kind of I don't know how to describe it unless you're from here. There's a quality to Northern Irish people that is still like that. You know what? I agree. And we're not too dissimilar over here, you know, obviously in England and stuff like that. It's very much like a self-defamation. Like, you know, people say, oh, pride comes before a fall. And we talk about ego as we think of it as an unhealthy term. But you know what? No, healthy ego, healthy self-confidence. And I've had this with the podcast and stuff. People, I feel it's so sad that I have to come on here sometimes and sing people's praises because they're like, oh no, well, I don't really, it's not about me. It's not about, I'm like, it bloody is. What you've done is fantastic. What you've done is against the odds. What is challenging. Have that pride. You know, we don't celebrate each other as much as we should. And in doing so, I think we have tried to teach people, or don't talk about everything that you've done. It's not all about you. And you know what? There's two sides to that coin. We need to be a little bit more proud about what we do. Otherwise, we just become insignificant because people don't recognize the great work that Hunter's done or the great work that the emergency services do. And we'll find ourselves irrelevant, and we'll sing that song all the way into obscurity where nobody even knows what we do and nobody knows the great things that we do. Well, thank you for those kind words. I mean, I do believe that if we don't market and tell people about what we do, we're not going to get very far in today's world. So, you know, we have to engage in the marketplace and you know, through marketing and social media in a way that we were completely oblivious to, quite frankly, at the start of my career. It's such a vital part of the modern world, you know, and I mean, there's so much disingenuousness in so much of that media that makes me feel a bit uncomfortable. You know, I'm not very experienced. I've never been on Facebook or many of these other things that some people use. I've started to do LinkedIn very recently. People are scared of talking about that sort of stuff, and I always think that it's fear masquerading as practicality when they say, "Oh, you don't need to do that." Do you know what? We should acknowledge each other. I always say to my kids, "Shy kids don't get sweets." You know what I mean? The worst thing somebody's going to say is no. So just put yourself out there and ask the question.
Yeah, I believe in that too. That's for sure.
Simon, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you. I don't know if we managed to wrestle our way into your monthly manual, but obviously somewhere or some way there was a gap in your priorities that allowed you to spend some time with us. So I know people will take a lot of value from it. Selfishly, I've certainly taken a lot of value from our conversation. So I want to thank you for taking time away from your loved ones and your business to be with us.
Hey, thank you very, very much indeed. You're extremely good at this. I've genuinely enjoyed chatting to you, and hope we get to sit down together and have a beer someday and have an hour chat.
I'd absolutely love that. Simon, thank you so much for your time, brother. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you soon.
Thanks very much, Peter.
Well, there you go, boys and girls. That was my conversation with Simon. There's a whole bunch of little takeaways from that episode that I am going to put in the notes now. I keep saying I'm going to put stuff in the notes, and I don't remember to put stuff in the notes. But certainly that monthly manual, Stephen Lawson, I am going to dig that one out and make sure we get it. Big thanks to our partners of the podcast, and a big thanks to you. Please click subscribe. That's the best way for you to find out what's happening, what's coming out next on the podcast. It really helps us as well. You can do as a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. You can share any of our stuff on the social media platforms, Instagram, YouTube. We are going to do some more on LinkedIn. Simon's reminded me as well on there. I need to get around to doing it. But until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, stay hungry. Please support your emergency services frontline workers wherever you are in the world. And we will see you again real soon right here on the Firefighters Podcast.